Chair now recognizes Dr. Foxx from North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very, very grateful to you for scheduling this hearing, and I thank the witnesses for being here. I particularly thank Mr. White for his very clear comments about what the effective regulations are on our economy and on our culture. We all know the Biden administration's regulatory overreach is out of control. It's all too common for me to hear from my constituents about new rules and regulations from the administration that will put them out of business and destroy their livelihoods. We cannot allow this disregard for the cost imposed by the federal government through regulations on families, businesses, and even local governments to continue increasing unaddressed. Last month, I introduced H.R. 3230, the Unfunded Mandates Accountability and Transparency Act, or YAMADA, as we call it. This bill would bring real transparency and accountability to the regulatory process, but by requiring the true cost of new major regulations, including those passed on to state and local governments, to be carefully calculated and considered before implementation. The Biden administration has displayed a pattern of grossly underestimating the cost of new regulations while greatly exaggerating the purported benefits by gaming the current system. We need to make sure that federal rules and regulations do not unduly burden families and job creators and slow our economic engine. So I'm going to ask Mr. Campo, Professor Mulligan, Mr. White, would the reforms contained in YAMADA help reduce the burden of future rules and regulations? Mr. Campo.
Thank you, Congresswoman Foxx. Yes, UMRA, the statute it's amending, is a terrific statute, and I think it unfortunately does not get implemented as robustly as it ought to be. And I welcome the changes in YAMADA. I think that they strengthen.
Professor Mulligan.
Yes, thank you for your question. I have also been looking at the Biden individual rules from the Biden administration, and they're dramatically undercounting costs. Sometimes they say they're cutting costs when they're really creating them. And any thing you could do to get a better accounting for those costs so that the people and the members of Congress could know better what's happening, I would think that would be helpful.
And Mr. White.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I would just add first, I think it's good for Congress to set these analytic standards for agencies. Second, I think it's important for Congress to ensure meaningful judicial review of agency analysis to make sure that they're properly rigorous. I'm thinking it's just the end of the school year. I know it's better when students don't grade their own exams, but rather have the teachers grade them. And I think it's a good thing when there's at least some check and balance outside of the executive branch on the agency's analysis.
Yes, and I think you all have alluded to it today. We can write legislation a lot more tightly than we write it, and that's been something I have been working on for a long time. You all have talked about the Trump administration issuing a series of executive orders to reform the way federal regulations are issued. Many of these ideas were inspired by legislation worked on in the House and by members of this committee. Are there aspects of YAMADA that were implemented in the Trump executive orders? Mr. Campo, I'll give you that question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, we tried to expand and strengthen the role of analysis. It's something that is, been agreed upon over the decades on a bipartisan basis that analysis is important, and we tried to strengthen its role anywhere and everywhere we could. I noted in my written testimony several ways that we went about that, the transparency aspects of it as well, absolutely crucial. We took major transparency steps with respect to the unified agenda, with respect to posting rules for engagement earlier on across the board.
Thank you. Professor Mulligan, I don't have much time left, but you mentioned in your testimony that the cost in the Biden administration the first 2 years is about $10,000 per household of rules and regulations. It's really a staggering burden. Is there anything that the Biden administration has done to justify this absurd new regulatory burden?
No, I'm not sure they've acknowledged it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair now